Ever had that moment? You walk into a room, maybe a meeting, a party, and suddenly your brain just hits the panic button. Your palms sweat. Maybe your voice catches, and there's this relentless script playing. What if I say something stupid? What if they judge me? What if I blush?
Well, yeah, their internal monologue.
Exactly. You're physically there, but mentally you're already running for the door. Or maybe just trying to become invisible. It's more than just shyness, isn't it?
Way more.
It's this profound, often really debilitating anxiety that, well, a lot of us know all too well. Today, we're going on a deep dive into social anxiety, how it takes hold, why it feels so sticky, and most importantly, how you can navigate any situation with, hopefully, a bit more ease.
Yeah, and we're not just talking theories here.
No, definitely not.
We want to give you practical, powerful insights, stuff drawn from decades of understanding how our minds work.
Insights that can genuinely shift your experience in social settings. Look, this isn't about, eliminating every single jitter you might ever feel.
Right, that's probably not realistic or even desirable sometimes.
True. It's more about transforming that overwhelming fear into something more like manageable discomfort and ultimately into genuine confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Our mission for you today is really to unlock the core mechanisms behind social anxiety. We want to equip you with tangible strategies, things gleaned from, well, robust psychological approaches.
So you can understand why these experiences feel so stubborn.
Exactly. And then, crucially, give you a roadmap, a way to truly change how you engage with the world around you.
Okay, so let's kick things off by really defining what social anxiety is. Because like I said, for many people, it just gets lumped in with being shy or maybe being a little awkward sometimes. But there's a real significant difference, isn't there? Where's that line? Where does shyness kind of morph into something more, something we actually call social anxiety disorder or SAD?
That's such a critical distinction to make because it's often misunderstood. Shyness, as you said, is often seen as more of a personality trait.
Yeah.
Lots of people experience occasional self-consciousness, right? Maybe a fleeting blush if you're put on the spot.
Sure, happens to everyone.
It's part of the human experience. But social anxiety disorder is fundamentally different because it interferes. It messes with your normal routine, causes immense ongoing distress.
Okay, interference is the key word.
Definitely. Think of it like this. It's perfectly natural to feel a flutter of nerves before a big job interview or maybe a first date.
Yeah, totally normal.
That's a normal, usually transient response to a high-stakes situation. But if you have social anxiety, you might spend weeks dreading that interview, just agonizing over every single potential misstep.
Wow, weeks!
Yeah, or you might even call in sick to avoid it entirely. Or if you force yourself to go, maybe your hands tremble so much you can barely hold your water glass, or your voice gets so strained you struggle to speak clearly.
So the intensity and duration are way off the charts compared to just nerves.
Exactly. It's when these feelings are so intense, so persistent, and so disruptive that they actually dictate your life choices. That's when it crosses the line from occasional discomfort into, well, a genuine disorder.
So it's not just a momentary discomfort that passes, it's something that genuinely impacts your life choices, essentially shrinking your world.
Precisely.
And that must feel incredibly isolating for anyone listening right now, maybe thinking, oh my God, am I the only one who feels this way? How common is this, really?
Oh, you are absolutely profoundly not alone. In fact, social anxiety is remarkably common, far more prevalent than most people probably realize.
Really?
Yeah. Studies indicated it affects approximately 8% of women and about 6.1% of men. So when you crunch those numbers, we're talking about roughly 40 million adults, just 18 and older, in the U.S. alone.
40 million, wow.
Imagine that. Tens of millions of people navigating this exact struggle. So for anyone listening who feels this, please know, millions of others understand what you're going through. This isn't some rare, isolated thing. It's a pervasive challenge for a really significant chunk of the population.
That's a staggering number.
Yeah.
It really drives home that point. You are not alone. It's often referred to as an illness of lost opportunities, which is such a powerful, kind of poignant phrase. What does that actually mean for someone living with it day to day?
It's a heartbreaking reality for many. Social anxiety can lead people to make major life choices, specifically to accommodate their illness, to work around the anxiety.
How so? Like what kind of choices?
Well, imagine turning down a dream job, a job that involves, say, public speaking or frequent team interactions. Not because you lack the skills, no,
Yeah.
but because the mere thought of that social scrutiny feels too overwhelming. Or avoiding pursuing romantic relationships, or even just deep friendships, because the potential for judgment or embarrassment feels absolutely unbearable.
So you just opt out.
You opt out. It means actively choosing not to go for promotions,
Yeah.
or certain educational opportunities, or even simple social gatherings that could actually enrich their lives. It's truly tragic, really, because it stops people from reaching their full potential, from exploring their passions, and from forming those meaningful connections that, make life vibrant.
It's like their world just shrinks.
Exactly. Not because they choose it, but because the anxiety forces them into a smaller, supposedly safer box.
That makes perfect sense. It really does sound like being trapped in a cage of your own making, where the bars are made of fear. So, beyond those big picture impacts, when social anxiety actually manifests, what does it look like? What are the physical sensations, those relentless thoughts, and the behaviors people might notice?
Well, the symptoms are quite diverse, and they often kind of cascade, one leading to another. On the physical side, we frequently see responses that are very typical of our primal fight or flight mechanism,
Even when there's no real danger.
right? Even when there's no actual physical danger. This can include things like excessive blushing, which for many people becomes a deeply feared symptom in itself, along with profuse sweating, trembling, heart palpitations, that feeling like your heart's going to pound right out of your chest.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Some people also experience nausea or stomach upset, maybe a stammer, or rapid, almost breathless speech as their anxiety ramps up. These are all involuntary physiological reactions. It's your body's alarm system basically screaming danger in response to what it perceives as a social threat.
It's incredible how our bodies can react so intensely to what is essentially just a social situation. What about the mental landscape then? What are the core fears and the thoughts that go along with those physical sensations?
Absolutely. And the cognitive and emotional symptoms are truly at the core of the experience, really driving it. The central fear for individuals with social anxiety is almost always being the focus of attention or behaving in a way that they believe will be embarrassing or humiliating.
Not just that it might be, but that it will be.
Exactly. It's this conviction. And it isn't just a fleeting thought. It's a constant, often debilitating loop of negative anticipation. For instance, you might be at a party trying to have fun, but your mind is just consumed by the fear that you'll spill your drink or say something incredibly foolish, and then everyone will laugh or judge you.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. This pervasive fear then triggers that cascade of anxiety symptoms we talked about. And in situations of really intense fear, it can even escalate to full-blown panic attacks, which are incredibly distressing and disorienting for people.
And how does this translate into actual behavior? What do people do in social situations when they're feeling this way? Are there clear, observable actions?
There definitely are. The behavioral responses are often quite noticeable, though sometimes they can be subtle. You might see people averting their gaze, really struggling to make eye contact, or showing fewer facial expressions than someone who's comfortable, almost like they're trying to blend into the wallpaper.
Trying to be invisible again.
Right. They often have difficulty initiating conversations, let alone maintaining them. They feel like they're constantly searching for the right thing to say or terrified of awkward silences. And sadly, a really significant behavioral response, particularly if the anxiety is undiagnosed or untreated, is self-medication.
Ah, right. Using substances.
Exactly. This often involves using alcohol or sometimes other drugs to try and reduce their fears and inhibitions in social settings, to take the edge off. This can, unfortunately, spiral into serious substance abuse issues, which just compounds the original problem and creates an even more complex challenge.
So it's this deeply rooted problem that just spirals physical, mental, behavioral facets, all reinforcing each other. Which brings us to our next big question. Why? Why does social anxiety feel so stubbornly persistent, so sticky? Why do these patterns keep going, even when intellectually someone might know their fears are probably exaggerated? How does this vicious cycle really take hold and keep itself going?
Well, what's truly fascinating and often really counterintuitive is that the very ways people try to cope with social anxiety often end up reinforcing it. It's a trap.
How does that work?
When individuals anticipate feeling social anxiety in a particular situation, they tend to respond in one of two fundamental ways. The first, and perhaps most obvious, is complete avoidance.
Just don't go.
Exactly. They simply steer clear of the situation altogether. Maybe they don't apply for that promotion that requires public speaking, or they consistently turn down invitations to parties or networking events. This avoidance provides immediate short-term relief.
Ah, the payoff.
Right. Which is incredibly reinforcing for the brain. It's like hitting the off button on the anxiety, and your brain quickly learns avoidance equals relief, so keep avoiding.
Right, so the brain essentially learns the wrong lesson. It reinforces a behavior that ultimately limits your life.
Precisely. But the critical downside, the real kicker, is that this prevents them from ever learning new, accurate information about the actual likelihood of their feared outcomes. They never get to test the reality of their fears.
So those negative beliefs just stay there unchallenged.
Exactly. They become entrenched. Now, the second response, and this is where the more subtle traps lie, is what we call entering with strategies. They might put themselves in the situation, but they engage in certain behaviors or mental acrobatics to try and make being in that situation somewhat easier or safer.
And these strategies, which feel helpful, actually backfired, aren't they? That's the paradox you mentioned. What are those internal processes that keep the cycle spinning?
That's it. There are three key internal maintaining factors that really keep this cycle going. The first is self-focused attention.
Okay, what's that?
Instead of genuinely engaging with the external environment, the person they're talking to, the flow of the conversation, the details of the room, their attention turns sharply inward.
Like a spotlight on themselves.
Exactly. They're constantly monitoring how they're coming across, how they look, what they're saying, how their body feels. Is my face red? Did I just say too many times? Are they judging how my hands are shaking? This intense internal focus prevents them from picking up on external evidence that would actually disconfirm their negative beliefs.
Because they're too busy looking inward.
Right. They might miss a friendly smile or a nod of agreement or genuine interest in what they're saying because they're too busy scrutinizing their own perceived flaws. It's like wearing blinders, but the blinders are pointed inward. You're so busy watching your own performance that you miss the actual show happening around you.
That's a perfect analogy. You're so caught up in being the judge, jury, and executioner of your own experience that you miss the reality of the interaction.
Indeed. The second factor is safety behaviors. These are specific actions people engage in to try and prevent those feared consequences.
Like what kind of actions?
Think about it. Averting eye contact, talking less, meticulously rehearsing sentences in their mind before speaking, censoring what they're about to say to make sure it's safe or perfect, hiding their face if they fear blushing, staying on the edge of groups, or, as we mentioned, using alcohol.
Okay, those sound like sensible precautions if you're scared.
They feel sensible. But here's the stunning paradox. These safety behaviors often backfire. They actually increase the likelihood of the very negative outcome they are trying to prevent.
How? That seems incredibly counterintuitive. My instinct would be to cling to them even more tightly if I felt anxious. Can you give us another example of how doing what feels safe actually makes things worse?
Certainly. Let's take someone who deeply fears saying something stupid or uninteresting in a conversation.
Okay.
To prevent this, they might rehearse every sentence meticulously in their head before speaking, or censor what they really want to say, choosing only bland, safe topics.
Okay, sounds careful.
But what happens? This often makes their speech sound stiff, unnatural, or hesitant, which then might make the conversation flow less smoothly or lead to those awkward pauses they were dreading.
Ah, so the attempt to avoid awkwardness creates it.
Precisely. The very thing they feared, appearing uninteresting or awkward, can become a reality because of their attempts to prevent it. Or someone fears excessive sweating. They might wear layers or keep their arms pinned to their sides. This can make them feel hotter, which induces more sweating, or they might appear rigid and unfriendly, leading others to subtly disengage.
Wow.
It's a vicious circle where the perceived solution actually perpetuates the problem. What feels like a protective shield is actually feeding the anxiety. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's a profound realization. What feels like a protective shield is actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then there are those relentless, often negative thoughts, right? They seem to be the constant soundtrack to the whole experience.
Yes, the third key factor. Negative automatic thoughts, ATs, and beliefs. These are those constant, intrusive, negative self-talk messages that just pop into your head, often just below conscious awareness.
Like little darts of negativity.
Exactly. They won't like me. I'll look stupid. Everyone can see how nervous I am. I'm definitely going to make a fool of myself. These thoughts are often accepted as absolute facts, even though they are frequently distorted or just plain inaccurate.
They feel true in the moment.
They feel incredibly true. They become the truth that governs behavior, even if that truth is completely subjective and not actually based in reality.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. the science behind this loop. It's not just a psychological theory. There's actually robust research on how our attention works, or maybe malfunctions, in social anxiety.
Indeed there is. We're talking about attention bias, and it's a critical area of research that helps explain why this cycle is so persistent. Socially anxious individuals tend to show a very specific pattern. Hypervigilance followed by avoidance.
Hypervigilance, then avoidance. What does that mean in plain English?
Okay, so it means they initially show increased attention toward negative social cues, like spotting a scowling face in a crowd, or what they interpret as a threatening facial expression.
So they're quick to spot potential danger.
Very quick. But then, crucially, they quickly turn their attention away from these cues. They disengage. It's like they're constantly scanning for danger. They spot something they interpret as a threat, and then they immediately look away from the very information that can help them evaluate if that danger is real or just a misinterpretation.
So they spot a potential threat and then immediately look away, never giving themselves the chance to confirm or deny if it was actually a threat in the first place, like a quick glance and a snap judgment without any verification.
Exactly. It prevents reality testing. Consider a common example we sometimes call the rejection cycle. A socially anxious person might be in a conversation and perceive, say, a slight frown or a momentary lack of eye contact from their partner. Their attention immediately registers this as rejection or disinterest. And in response, driven by that internal alarm bell, they might quickly avert their own gaze, or maybe mentally withdraw from the interaction, start planning their escape. Because they turn their attention away so quickly, they never stick around long enough to find out that maybe the individual was actually just thinking deeply about what they said, or was genuinely welcoming, or perhaps just tired and momentarily distracted.
So their fear gets confirmed, but only because they didn't get the full picture.
Exactly. Their initial, often distorted belief of rejection is reinforced because they didn't gather the disconfirming evidence. The loop closes, making the anxiety feel even more valid next time.
That's a perfect illustration of how these internal biases play out in real time, cementing those false beliefs. And you mentioned different kinds of self-focus earlier. Is there a specific type that really fuels social anxiety more than others?
Yes, research does distinguish between different types. What seems to most strongly predict greater social anxiety is what we call public self-focus.
Public self-focus.
Yeah, this is a deep, often consuming concern for how one's actions are impacting others and what impressions other people are forming of them. Individuals with high public self-focus are constantly thinking things like, what do they think of me right now? Am I doing this right? Do I look okay? Can they see my hands shaking?
So it's all about the external perception.
Very much so. Other more private forms of self-consciousness, like focusing on your personal goals or internal physical sensations, might lead to other negative feelings. But it's that outward-facing concern for others' perceptions, that constant worry about judgment, that truly drives and sustains social anxiety.
Okay, so what does this all mean when we zoom out a bit, look at the broader context? Are there evolutionary reasons or maybe developmental roots to why some of us might be wired this way? It feels like something so deeply ingrained sometimes, more than just a learned behavior.
That's an excellent question. And yeah, evolutionary and developmental theories offer some pretty compelling insights that help contextualize this deeply human experience. From an evolutionary perspective, anxiety itself isn't necessarily a flaw. It's often adaptive.
How can anxiety be adaptive? It feels awful.
Well, think about it. Anxiety serves a protective function. It helps us understand what is socially acceptable and what isn't, which was crucial for group survival back in the day. Take embarrassment, for instance.
Okay.
It might feel terrible in the moment, but it actually helps us maintain social norms. If someone makes a minor social faux pas and appears embarrassed, research actually shows they're often liked more by others.
Really? Why?
Because it signals that they care about social rules. They care about fitting in. If you had zero concern about being embarrassed, you might seem aloof or uncaring about the social fabric, which could actually lead to genuine exclusion.
So the very discomfort we tried desperately to avoid actually serves a purpose in building social connection. That's a fascinating reframe. Feeling awkward might actually make you more relatable sometimes.
It truly is. And this connects directly to the idea of biological adaptation to group living. Humans are inherently social creatures, right? We evolved to live in groups for shared labor, protection, mating.
Safety in numbers.
Exactly. So any perceived threat to one's status within the group or any potential for exclusion could historically have had severe consequences, maybe even death. So our brains are kind of hardwired to be highly sensitive to social cues to detect potential threats to our belonging.
It's like our brains are still running that old caveman software.
Pretty much. Hyper alert for social predators. You know that feeling when you just said something a little awkward and your brain immediately jumps to, okay, pack your bags, time to find a new tribe.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
This is further explored in what's sometimes called exclusion theory. At its simplest, social anxiety might stem from a basic, fundamental human need to fit into a given social group to avoid isolation. The ability to detect subtle social cues, being physiologically sensitive to them, helps us anticipate and hopefully prevent rejection or criticism.
So it's a survival mechanism?
A survival mechanism? Absolutely, albeit one that can seriously go into overdrive in modern society, where the threat of social exclusion isn't usually life-threatening, but it feels just as catastrophic to the anxious brain.
And what about individual development? Are there childhood factors that make someone more susceptible, or is it purely genetic, you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's usually a mix. Our early experiences play a significant role. A fearful temperament from childhood can be a predisposition. Some kids are simply born more sensitive or reactive than others.
Nature and nurture.
Exactly. Beyond that, maybe underdeveloped social skills can contribute. Or, paradoxically, even excessive parental overprotection.
Overprotection, how does that contribute?
Well, it can prevent a child from developing their own independent social coping skills and resilience. If a child is never allowed to navigate minor social bumps and scrapes on their own, they don't build confidence in their ability to handle them later.
Makes sense. They don't learn they can survive a little awkwardness.
Right. Other factors could include a lack of emotional expression modeled in the home, or perhaps observing parents or caregivers exhibiting their own social fears, which can implicitly teach a child that social situations are inherently threatening. Even something called sensory processing sensitivity, basically, and a trait involving increased sensitivity of the nervous system to various stimuli can play a role, making someone more acutely aware of social situations and their potential pitfalls. All these elements can contribute to creating fertile ground for social anxiety to take root.
Okay, so we've really mapped out the problem landscape here. From the subtle symptoms to the profound impact, how it gets maintained by those tricky safety behaviors and self-focus, and even how understanding its evolutionary roots gives us a fresh perspective. We've painted a pretty clear picture of the challenge. The good news is there's a powerful evidence-based roadmap to navigate this. So let's dive deep now into cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and specifically how it offers practical, tangible solutions.
Right. CBT offers a highly structured, yet remarkably flexible approach. What's really compelling about this particular treatment program for social phobia is its collaborative and scientific nature. It's not a rigid, one-size-fits-all solution.
It's tailored.
Very much so. Therapists tailor it to each patient's unique presentation of social anxiety, even integrating work on co-occurring conditions like depression when that's applicable.
Yeah.
And the emphasis isn't just on, sitting and having an intellectual discussion about your problems. It's really focused on experiential learning.
Meaning actually doing things.
Exactly. Actually doing things that challenge your beliefs in real time out in the world. It's about learning by doing, not just by talking.
That makes perfect sense. It's one thing to understand something intellectually, but it's a whole different ballgame to truly feel and experience a different reality. How does that collaborative journey begin in CBT?
It begins right from the get-go with what we call the model of social phobia. In the very first session, typically, the patient and therapist collaboratively build a personalized model of their own social anxiety.
Their own unique version.
Precisely. This isn't about the therapist saying, here's the diagram, fit yourself into it. No, it's about illuminating their specific patterns, their unique avoidance behaviors, their typical automatic thoughts, their physical symptoms, the particular safety behaviors they rely on, their level of self-focused attention, and how they see themselves, their self-image.
So it's like creating a personalized blueprint.
Exactly. A unique map of your anxiety. The goal is to accurately represent their experience, making them an active participant, an expert on their own anxiety right from the start.
That sounds like a brilliant way to empower someone immediately, getting them to understand their own system. And then there's this specific technique you mentioned earlier that sounds truly groundbreaking, almost like a revelation for many people, the safety behaviors experiment and video feedback. What exactly is that, and how does it work to shift perspective so dramatically?
Yes. This experiment, typically done early on, often in session 2, is indeed one of the most powerful and, frankly, enlightening components of CBT for social anxiety. Its primary purpose is to experientially demonstrate to the patient two critical things.
Okay, what are they?
First, the detrimental impact of their own self-focused attention and their use of those safety behaviors we talked about. And second, perhaps even more importantly, that their belief about how they come across to others is often significantly different from the actual reality.
They see the disconnect.
They see it, often dramatically.
Yeah.
And this is particularly reinforced through the video feedback and sometimes getting direct feedback from a neutral participant in the interaction. It's really about helping them see themselves through an objective lens rather than that distorted, anxious internal one.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do you actually set up such a potent experiment? What are the steps involved?
Right. So we begin by collaboratively selecting a social interaction that is moderately difficult for the patient. It shouldn't be so easy that it causes zero anxiety, but definitely not so overwhelming that they feel completely paralyzed. A common example is just a simple 5-minute conversation with a Confederate, maybe a neutral research assistant, or someone specifically trained to interact calmly and naturally.
Okay, a controlled interaction.
Exactly. Then the patient clearly articulates their specific feared outcome in this situation. What are they most afraid will happen? Is it excessive blushing, saying constantly, appearing totally boring, trembling uncontrollably? If it's blushing, for instance, we might even have a red piece of paper nearby for a visual comparison later, just to make the feared outcome really tangible.
For concrete.
Then, before the interaction, the patient makes several predictions on a 0-10 scale. How anxious do they expect to feel during the interaction? How anxious do they expect to appear to the other person? How well do they think they'll perform overall? Like, how coherent will they sound? And what's the likelihood of any other specific feared negative consequences happening?
So they put their fears down on paper.
Precisely. And crucially, they also identify 1 or 2 key safety behaviors they typically use in this exact kind of situation. Those behaviors we discussed, like avoiding eye contact, keeping their hands hidden, or meticulously rehearsing sentences in their head.
Okay, so they've set their own parameters, identified their usual coping mechanisms, and made concrete predictions. Then what happens? The interactions begin.
Then come the 2 interactions, which are the core test, done back to back. First is interaction 1 with safety behaviors. The patient is explicitly instructed, go into this conversation, pay careful attention to how you are coming across, try to look as good as possible, and fully engage those safety behaviors you just identified.
So they deliberately do the things they usually do to feel safe.
Exactly. They might be mentally rehearsing, trying to hide their hands if they tremble, carefully controlling their voice, whatever their specific safety behaviors are. And afterwards, they rate how self-focused they felt during that interaction.
Okay, an interaction.
Immediately after, we do interaction 2, without safety behaviors. The instructions here are the complete opposite. Okay, now, go back in for another 5 minutes. This time, I want you to drop all those safety behaviors we identified, let them go, and instead, focus your attention outwardly on the social situation, on the other person.
Just focus out, not in.
Right. The instruction is often something like, get lost in the conversation, treat it like a ping pong match, just respond naturally to what the other person says, really listen to them, and forget about monitoring yourself or the impression you're making. Just let go.
Wow. That sounds incredibly liberating on one hand, but also potentially terrifying for someone who has relied on those safety behaviors for years. How do you process this raw experiential data afterwards? What's the debrief like?
This is where the profound insights really happen. First, we simply compare their predicted ratings before the interactions to their actual ratings after each one. And patients very, very often find, well, a couple of things. One, their actual anxiety is often much lower than they predicted it would be, especially in the second interaction. And 2, more surprisingly to them, they often performed better and actually felt less anxious when they were not using their safety behaviors.
Really? Better without them?
Yeah. This often comes as a big surprise, as the manual calls it, and a truly liberating insight. It directly challenges their long-held belief that these behaviors are essential for their social survival. It shows them they don't have to expend all that exhausting effort trying to control themselves.
That must be mind-blowing for some people.
It really can be. Then comes the video feedback, which is absolutely critical. The most crucial instruction here is, watch this video as if you were observing someone else, not from your own subjective internal feeling, but objectively, like you're watching a stranger.
Detaching from the internal critic.
Precisely. This helps them see how they actually appeared versus their distorted internal image. The most important lesson, often, is seeing the huge discrepancy between how they predicted they would look. often visualizing themselves as looking incredibly awkward, visibly anxious, just a total mess, and how they actually looked on the video, which is often much more composed, confident, and competent than they ever imagined.
So they literally see the difference.
They see it. We might also point out, watching the videos side by side, that sometimes they actually look worse or more unnatural when they are employing their safety behaviors, that stiffness we talked about. This visually reinforces the detrimental impact of those behaviors. It helps them experientially learn that they are acceptable and they're probably not going to be rejected even if they don't try so hard to hide who they really are.
So they literally see that their internal reality doesn't match the external one and that their attempts to fix things might actually be making them appear less natural. That's a powerful revelation. And there's even external feedback sometimes.
Yes, often getting objective input from the neutral participant, the person they interacted with, can powerfully confirm or disconfirm the patient's beliefs. Hearing directly, "No, I didn't notice you blushing," or "Actually, I found what you said really interesting," adds another layer of external reality testing.
Wow. And the learning continues outside the session.
Absolutely. After these powerful in-session demonstrations, the learning continues with homework. A simple but incredibly powerful exercise is the focus of attention walk. The patient takes 2 short walks, say 5 minutes each, perhaps first in a quiet area and then somewhere more populated like a mall or a busy park.
2 walks, different focus.
Exactly. In the first walk, they deliberately focus entirely on internal sensations, their breathing, their body movements, how they think they look to others, their thoughts. Pure self-focus. In the second walk, they deliberately engage all their senses with the external environment, the sounds, the smells, the textures, the colors, the details of the buildings, the people around them. Pure outward focus.
And what do they typically learn from that direct embodied experience?
It demonstrates so powerfully how just shifting their attention profoundly affects their experience and their interpretation of reality.
Yeah.
If they do it in a populated area, they often report that when they are self-focused, it feels like everyone is noticing them, staring at them like they're under this intense spotlight.
Yeah, that feeling.
But then, when they shift their attention outwardly, truly engaging with the world around them, they realize people generally don't stare. They're engrossed in their own lives, looking at their phones, talking to each other, mostly oblivious to the internal struggle happening inside the patient's head. It's a direct, experiential challenge to their interpretation of reality, proving that the spotlight is usually only in their own mind.
That's amazing. It moves it from just an intellectual understanding to something they feel and experience directly. And speaking of direct experience, after that initial foundational work with the model and the experiment, the real heavy lifting begins with in vivo exposure, right? This is where the rubber meets the road, where you truly face those fears head on in real life.
It's exactly right. From session 3 onwards, usually, in vivo exposures become the focal point of almost every session. Patients gradually work their way through a hierarchy of feared social situations. This is a personalized list they create, ranking situations from moderately difficult up to their most challenging ones, tailored to their unique fears.
So it's gradual, step by step.
Very much so. We don't throw you in the deep end. But the core principles remain absolutely consistent throughout. Always, always drop the safety behaviors and deliberately shift attention outwardly. Exposure isn't just about being there physically. It's about fundamentally changing how the situation is experienced, engaging with it differently, without the crutches that have been maintaining the anxiety. It's about showing your brain through repeated direct experience that the perceived threat isn't actually dangerous.
I can imagine how challenging that must be, even starting small. But what if someone has a very specific, maybe physical fear, like excessive sweating, or that they'll stammer uncontrollably, or blush beet red? How do you tackle these very specific, ingrained anxieties within an exposure setting?
That's where a really powerful and sometimes, somewhat provocative technique called exaggerating feared behaviors comes in. It's essentially about taking the thing you dread most and intentionally bringing it to the surface, doing it on purpose.
Wait, you make them do the thing they fear most? Like, on purpose?
Exactly. It sounds wild, but it's incredibly effective for challenging the catastrophic beliefs associated with those symptoms. For example, if a patient fears sweating excessively and being judged harshly for it, they might purposefully wear a heavy sweater on a warm day to induce sweating during an exposure. Or maybe even apply a little water to their face or underarms to simulate sweat before going into a social situation.
Wow, okay. Why? What does that achieve?
It allows them to directly test their predictions. How noticeable is the sweating, really? How do people actually react? What are the actual consequences? Often the outcome is incredibly liberating. They discover that either A, people don't notice nearly as much as they thought, or B, if they do notice, they really don't care or judge negatively, or C, even if someone did react negatively, which is rare, they can actually cope with it. The catastrophe they envision simply doesn't happen.
So it directly disproves the horror story in their head.
Precisely. Or if someone fears forgetting words or stammering, they might purposely forget their train of thought mid-sentence during a conversation, or intentionally say, or pause more often than usual. Again, it tests the reality. How bad is it really? Do people run away screaming? Usually not. It helps them see that these feared behaviors often have minimal negative impact in reality. It's about proving to yourself that the worst-case scenario isn't nearly as bad or as likely as your anxious imagination insists. Another clever way we sometimes gather contradictory information is through surveys. Let's say a patient believes that their interest in a niche hobby, maybe competitive dog grooming, is weird, and that people will judge them negatively for it, making them socially unacceptable.
Okay.
To challenge this belief, they might actually design and conduct a small, informal survey. They could ask a variety of people questions like, what do you think of people who have unusual or niche hobbies? Would you think less of someone if their hobby was X? Would you still be willing to be friends with this person?
Gathering real-world data.
Exactly. And the information gathered almost invariably disconfirms their negative predictions. It shows that people are generally far more open, accepting, or simply indifferent than the anxious mind assumes.
So it's about actively seeking out real-world evidence that contradicts those ingrained fears, whether through direct action like exposures or gathering objective data like surveys. It's like becoming your own scientific investigator, testing your hypotheses about social danger.
That's a great way to put it.
But it's not just about what you do, right? It's also crucially about what you think. This is where cognitive restructuring comes in, the part about actually rewiring those underlying thought patterns that fuel the anxiety. How do you help people identify and challenge those insidious negative automatic thoughts?
Right. Cognitive restructuring is woven throughout the exposure work, typically starting around session 3. The first step is simply learning to identify automatic thoughts, ATs. We help people tune into those discrete, specific, usually negative thoughts that just pop into their head spontaneously, often flying just below the radar of conscious awareness, and which they tend to accept as facts.
Those little nagging thoughts you barely notice but totally believe.
Exactly. Thoughts like, they won't like me. I probably look really stupid right now. Or, everybody can see how nervous I am. I bet I'm going to blush bright red. We emphasize that these thoughts occur automatically, like reflexes. And crucially, just because you have a thought, it doesn't automatically make it true.
Like thinking the world is flat doesn't make it flat.
Precisely. Our brains are brilliant thought-generating machines, but not all of those thoughts are accurate reflections of reality. Many are just noise or old habits.
Okay, so step 1 is catching the thoughts. What's next?
Once we start catching these immediate thoughts, we then shine a light on how they're often twisted or distorted. Think of these as common glitches in our mental software, cognitive distortions. Providing vivid examples helps patients start recognizing these patterns in their own thinking. It's like giving them labels for the tricks their mind plays on them. Shall we unmask a few of the usual suspects?
Yeah, let's do it. I have a feeling some of these might sound familiar to people listening.
Okay, first up, all or nothing thinking, also called black and white thinking, seeing things in rigid extreme categories. If my speech isn't absolutely perfect, then I'm a total failure. Or if I don't get invited to this one party, it proves I have absolutely no friends. There's no middle ground, no shades of gray allowed.
Right, so a single perceived flaw means total, utter failure no matter what else went well. It completely erases any nuance or partial success.
Exactly. Then there's overgeneralization. Taking a single negative event and blowing it up into a never-ending universal pattern of defeat. I messed up that one conversation, therefore I'll always mess up conversations and I'll never be good at small talk. Or, I didn't get that job, so clearly I'll never succeed at anything I try. One bad experience dictates all future ones, casting this long, dark shadow.
Like seeing the future through one bad moment.
Then mental filter. This is like having negative tunnel vision. You pick out a single negative detail and dwell on it exclusively, so it darkens your entire perception of reality, making it impossible to see anything positive.
Like a single drop of ink discoloring a whole glass of water.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You focus intensely on that one awkward pause you made, or that one person who looked away momentarily, and you completely ignore all the positive or neutral interactions that happen right alongside it. You filter out all the good stuff.
You completely overlook everything else, filtering out all the good. It's like selective hearing for negativity.
Precisely. Next up, jumping to conclusions. This one has two common flavors. First, mind reading. You arbitrarily conclude that someone is reacting negatively to you without actually checking or having any real evidence. They're definitely bored with me, I can just tell by the way they folded their arms, or she thinks I'm an idiot because I paused for half a second. You're convinced you know what others are thinking, usually negatively without any proof.
Playing psychic, but only predicting bad thoughts.
Right. And the second flavor is the fortune teller error. You anticipate that things will turn out badly, and you treat that negative prediction as an established fact even before anything has actually happened. I just know this presentation is going to be an absolute disaster before I even get up there, or I just know I'm going to embarrass myself horribly at the office party tonight. You're predicting a negative future and then acting as if it's already come true.
Living the failure before it even has a chance not to happen.
Exactly. We also have magnification, often called catastrophizing or minimization. This is like using a binocular trick.
Yeah.
On reality, you wildly exaggerate the importance of your mistakes or perceived flaws while simultaneously shrinking your own desirable qualities or successes.
Blowing up the bad, shrinking the good.
Right. For instance, I made one tiny typo in that email. Now everyone in the company thinks I'm completely incompetent and my career is basically ruined. That's magnification or catastrophizing. Or, the flip side, oh, I only got that promotion because I got lucky. It's not because I'm actually skilled or worked hard for it. That's minimization of your own worth.
You make mountains out of molehills for your own errors, and molehills out of mountains for your strengths or achievements. It's such an unfair distortion of reality.
It really is.
Yeah.
Then there's emotional reasoning. Believing that because you feel something strongly, it must automatically be true. I feel really anxious right now, therefore I must be in serious danger, and I probably look ridiculous to everyone.
So feelings equal facts.
Essentially, yes. Your emotions become your sole, infallible barometer of truth, regardless of any objective evidence to the contrary. And the notorious should statements, having rigid, inflexible rules about how you or others should behave, often leading to intense guilt, shame, or anger. I should be outgoing and charming and witty at this party. Anything less means I'm a failure, or they should know better than to interrupt me like that. For yourself, these shoulds often lead to immense guilt and self-criticism when you inevitably fall short. When applied to others, they often lead to anger and resentment when people don't meet your unstated, rigid expectations.
Setting yourself and others up for failure with impossible standards.
Pretty much. And finally, personalization. Seeing yourself as the primary cause of some negative external event for which you weren't actually primarily responsible, taking undue blame or responsibility.
Like thinking everything bad that happens is somehow your fault.
Exactly. The team meeting went badly because I asked that one slightly off-topic question, when maybe there are dozens of factors at play. Or, my friend seems quiet and withdrawn today. It must be something I did or said. You inappropriately assign responsibility for others' feelings or external events entirely to yourself.
Wow. Those are incredibly relatable. I think most of us probably fall into some of those mental traps from time to time without even realizing it.
Okay, so once you've helped someone identify these distorted automatic thoughts, how do you actually dispute them? How do you start creating a more rational, healthier response? This is where we introduce specific tools, primarily the dispute questions. These are crucial questions designed to challenge the veracity, the logic, and the usefulness of those automatic thoughts, to basically poke holes in the absolute certainty they often carry.
Like cross-examining your own thoughts.
That's a great way to think about it. Questions like, do I know for certain that X will happen? What evidence do I actually have that this thought is true? What's the evidence against it? Quote, could there be any other possible explanations for this situation besides my negative one? Am I 100% sure of these awful consequences? What's the most likely outcome here? Not just the absolute worst-case scenario I can imagine. Or even, what's the effect of believing this thought?
Yeah.
Is it helping me or hurting me? It's about building a logical case against your own irrational thoughts.
Okay, so you interrogate the thought, then what?
Then you formulate a rational response. This is essentially the objective, reasonable, balanced answer you generate in response to those dispute questions. For example, if the automatic thought is, I'm totally incompetent because I had to ask my boss a question, a dispute question might be, hold on, does asking one question automatically mean I'm incompetent? Is there any evidence that I sometimes am competent? The rational response could then be something like, okay, asking a clarifying question is actually a sign of engagement and wanting to do a good job, not incompetence. In fact, I've been complimented on the quality of my work on several occasions. Nobody does their work perfectly 100% of the time, and asking for help when needed is actually a strength.
So it's not about just slapping on a positive affirmation.
No, definitely not toxic positivity.
It's about finding a more balanced, evidence-based perspective.
Exactly. The aim isn't simply to trade a negative thought for an equally unrealistic positive one. It's about recognizing the errors or distortions in your thinking and replacing those irrational, unhelpful thoughts with objective, reasonable ones that are actually supported by evidence. And crucially, integrating this with that outward focus and dropping the safety behaviors. It's becoming your own internal detective, or maybe your own defense attorney, scrutinizing your thoughts rigorously rather than just accepting them as undisputed fact.
It sounds like becoming your own detective, scrutinizing your thoughts rather than just accepting them. That's incredibly empowering. And sometimes you might need a little extra sharpening for your toolkit, right? I know there are optional modules that can complement this core CBT work, offering additional specialized help for certain issues.
Exactly. These optional modules, things like imaginal exposure, social skills training, and assertiveness training, they don't replace the core work of in vivo exposures and cognitive restructuring, but they are integrated as needed to enhance progress, particularly when specific challenges pop up.
Okay, tell us briefly about those. What's imaginal exposure?
Imaginal exposure is particularly useful for tackling feared consequences that are maybe unlikely to actually occur in real life, but are so powerful in the person's mind that they fuel intense avoidance. Things like, if I keep saying stupid things, eventually everyone will reject me and I'll end up completely alone and jobless. Or, if I blush really badly one time, I'll be permanently shamed and no one will ever take me seriously again.
So it's about confronting those really catastrophic, often exaggerated future fears, but in a controlled, imaginative setting because you can't easily create them in real life. How does that actually work without experiencing it physically?
It involves collaboratively developing a very vivid, detailed script that captures the patient's core fears. It's usually written in the second person, present tense. You are standing there, you just said X. You see people starting to whisper. The script includes a lot of sensory detail, what you see, hear, smell, how your body feels, what thoughts are racing through your mind.
So you really immerse yourself in the feared scenario mentally.
Yes. The goal is to repeatedly expose yourself to the feared scenario in your imagination, staying with the anxiety until it naturally starts to decrease through habituation. You emotionally process and build tolerance for the fear of those highly improbable but subjectively devastating outcomes. Often the core concern isn't just the initial faux pas, but the imagined, persistent negative feedback or social exclusion that follows. Imaginal exposure helps you face that feared consequence directly, in a safe space.
Okay, that makes sense for those really big, hard-to-test fears. What about social skills training, or SST?
Right, social skills training, SST. Now, it's important to note that many, probably most, socially anxious individuals actually do have appropriate social skills. The problem is that these skills often get masked or inhibited by their intense self-focus and their reliance on safety behaviors, making them appear unskilled or awkward.
So the skills are there, just hidden.
Often, yes. Once the safety behaviors are dropped and attention is shifted outward, most people show surprising competence. But some individuals genuinely do lack certain specific skills, perhaps due to years of avoidance, or they have a strong perception that they lack skills. For them, SST can be invaluable. For example, if you spent years avoiding eye contact, you might genuinely need some practice making and holding it comfortably.
What kinds of specific social skills are we talking about here, typically?
We usually target 3 main areas. Conversational skills, things like how to initiate, maintain, and gracefully end conversations. Positive assertion, like giving compliments sincerely, expressing praise. And negative assertion, like how to refuse unreasonable requests politely but firmly, or express displeasure or disagreement respectfully.
Practical stuff.
Very practical. And this also includes the nonverbal aspects, appropriate eye contact, relaxed body language, effective vocal volume and tone. The process usually involves clear instructions, the therapist modeling the skill, demonstrating how it's done, role-playing scenarios with the patient, and then providing specific constructive feedback. We might even use online SST.
Online, like video chat.
No, more like using video recordings of their exposure practices, or even using a real-time camera feed in the session. This allows them to objectively observe their own behaviors, like seeing how unusual it actually looks to grip a glass tightly for dear life, and then rehearse more normal, relaxed ways of acting right there and then, getting immediate visual feedback.
Ah, that real-time visual feedback must be incredibly powerful for changing those subtle, often unconscious habits.
It really can be.
And finally, assertiveness training. How does that fit specifically with managing social anxiety? It feels related but distinct.
Assertiveness training is crucial because, as we've touched on, many socially anxious individuals default to a passive or non-assertive communication style as a safety behavior. They avoid expressing their needs or opinions to avoid potential conflict or judgment. The purpose of assertiveness training is to help them learn to express their thoughts, feelings, and beliefs correctly, honestly, and appropriately without violating the rights of others. It's about finding a healthy balance.
So not aggressive, but not passive either.
Exactly. We make really clear distinctions between the three styles. Passive non-assertive communication. This is where you don't express your honest feelings, thoughts, or needs, or if you do, it's in a really apologetic, self-effacing way. Nonverbal cues often include evasive eye contact, maybe fidgeting or hand-wringing, speaking too softly, hesitant speech, sometimes even laughing nervously when you're actually angry or upset. And crucially, this is often a safety behavior, an attempt to avoid conflict or negative evaluation by making yourself small and agreeable.
Okay, that's the default for many. What's the opposite end?
Aggressive communication. This is standing up for your rights, but in a way that violates others' rights. It's often about dominating, winning at all costs, sometimes through intimidation or manipulation. Nonverbal cues might include scaring eye contact, like a stare down, a loud or strident voice, sarcastic tone, finger pointing, interrupting. It's about overpowering the other person, not finding mutual respect.
Not healthy either. So the goal is the middle ground.
Precisely. The goal is assertive communication. This is the healthy middle path, respecting yourself and respecting others equally. It involves expressing yourself directly and honestly, but appropriately. Nonverbal cues typically include firm but comfortable eye contact, not that intense stare down, and appropriate voice volume for the situation, clear and fluent speech, and confident, open body gestures. It's about finding that balanced, confident stance where you can advocate for yourself while still respecting the other person's boundaries and perspective.
So it's about finding that balanced, confident middle path where you value your own needs and the other person's. What are some of the practical techniques taught within assertiveness training to help people achieve that?
There are several really useful techniques. Basic assertion is just a simple, direct statement of your rights, feelings, or preferences. No, this is not a good time for me to talk right now, or I'd prefer not to discuss my salary. Straightforward. Empathic assertion is great because it first acknowledges the other person's position or feelings, then states your own right or need. It shows you've heard them. For example, I understand you're really eager to get this project done, but I won't be able to work late tonight. Or, I know you're trying to be helpful by offering advice, but I'd really like to figure this out on my own for now.
Acknowledging first, then stating your piece. Nice.
Yeah, it softens it. Escalating assertion is useful when your initial assertion is ignored. You start with a minimal assertive statement and gradually become firmer if needed. And I-language assertion is particularly effective for expressing negative feelings constructively, avoiding blame. It usually follows a structure like, when you objectively describe the specific behavior, the effects are describe the impact on you or the situation. I feel state your feeling, optional but often helpful, and I prefer state what you want or need instead.
Can you give an example of that one?
Sure. Instead of saying, you always undermine me in meetings, which is blaming in general, you could say. When you interrupt me while I'm presenting my ideas in the team meeting specific behavior, the effect is that I lose my train of thought and feel disregarded impact feeling. I'd prefer it if you would let me finish my point before jumping in what you want.
Much more constructive.
Exactly. And all these skills are practiced rigorously in session, always with the emphasis on simultaneously draping those passive safety behaviors like speaking too quietly, avoiding eye contact, or apologizing unnecessarily for having a need or opinion.
This all sounds incredibly thorough. But it's clear this isn't a quick fix. It's really about building lasting change, transforming potentially years of ingrained patterns. So how do you help someone sustain this progress once the formal therapy sessions, say the typical 12 weeks, conclude? It really is like learning a new language. You don't just stop practicing after the lessons end, or you risk losing fluency, right?
That's a perfect analogy. You absolutely have to keep practicing. The formal treatment program provides the foundation and the tools, but the ultimate goal is always to equip you to become your own therapist, to continue the work independently long after the sessions finish.
Being your own therapist, I like that.
Yeah. A key part of this transition is goal setting, usually done in the final session or two. Patients work with the therapist to create specific, actionable, realistic goals for the future. Say, for the next 2 weeks, 1 month, 6 months, and even 1 year following treatment.
What kind of goals?
They're practical, real-world application goals. Things like, within the next month, I will initiate a brief conversation with a new person at a social gathering at least once a week, or I will volunteer to give a short update at my team meeting within the next 6 months, or I will practice assertive communication with my difficult relative at least twice in the next 2 weeks. These goals help translate the learned skills into ongoing real-world practice and keep the momentum going.
It keeps the learning alive outside the therapy room.
Exactly. And continued practice and monitoring are absolutely crucial. Homework isn't just for during the therapy. Regularly assigning exposure exercises and encouraging the continued use of self-monitoring forms like tracking automatic thoughts or safety behaviors provides continuous opportunities to use your new language, as the manual puts it.
Like language immersion keeps you using it.
Precisely. It's also really important to anticipate challenges. We remind people that these new skills and techniques won't necessarily be immediately available or feel perfectly smooth in the most difficult high-anxiety situations, especially early on. And that's entirely normal. It takes time and consistent effort, and occasional setbacks or slip-ups are just part of the learning process. The key is to view them not as failures, but as more data, more opportunities to learn, and keep applying what you've learned.
That language analogy really sticks with me. Learning to apply these skills even under pressure, making them feel second nature. That sounds like true mastery. What's the ultimate vision of fluency in this new language of social confidence? How do you know when someone has really integrated these changes?
Well, the powerful metaphor sometimes used in the field is that you'll eventually be able to argue under stress and dream in this new language.
Wow. Argue under stress and dream in it.
Yeah. It signifies true mastery, true integration. It means being able to access and apply these cognitive and behavioral shifts, even when you're under significant pressure, when your anxiety might naturally spike the ability to dispute a catastrophic thought, even when your heart is pounding, or to consciously choose to drop a safety behavior, even if every fiber of your being is screaming at you to use it. It means these new ways of thinking, feeling, and responding become so ingrained that they start to feel automatic, almost like your native tongue. They become your default, not the anxiety.
So the goal isn't necessarily zero anxiety ever again.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
That's likely an unrealistic expectation for most humans, frankly. Even the most outwardly confident people feel nerves sometimes. Instead, the long-term impact, the real win, is about fundamentally changing how you experience and think about social situations so that social anxiety no longer dictates your choices or limits your life.
Freedom, basically.
Exactly. You learn experientially deep down that you are acceptable, that you are worthy, and that you are not likely to be rejected or judged nearly as harshly as you fear, even if you don't hide who you really are. It's about achieving freedom. The freedom to choose to engage, to connect, to pursue opportunities, and to live a fuller, richer life, no longer constrained by the fear of judgment.
Okay, so we've really walked through the intricate web of social anxiety today, from its sometimes subtle symptoms and really profound impact, to understanding how it's maintained by those seemingly helpful but actually detrimental strategies like safety behaviors and intense self-focus. We've also seen how understanding its evolutionary roots can offer a bit of a fresh perspective, maybe even some self-compassion. Most importantly, though, we've laid out a powerful, evidence-based roadmap using cognitive behavioral therapy, starting with that enlightening safety behaviors experiment and video feedback that really challenges your perception of yourself.
That reality check.
Exactly. Moving through the transformative power of facing fears with in vivo exposures, learning to rewire your thoughts with cognitive restructuring, and adding practical skills like social and assertiveness training to your toolkit. The whole journey seems to be about recognizing those distorted realities, bravely dropping the strategies that aren't serving you, and courageously stepping into new, more authentic ways of being in the world.
Beautifully summarized. So here's a final thought to leave you with. If your mind has been convinced for years, maybe decades, that avoiding social scrutiny is your only viable option, and that your internal feeling of fear perfectly reflects how you truly appear to others, what other deeply held beliefs, perhaps about yourself or the world, might also be ready for a gentle, yet maybe profound challenge?
Ooh, that's a good one.
What new possibilities might open up for you when you realize that perhaps your own self-perception, that internal critic, has been the biggest hurdle all along, and that the path to freedom often lies, paradoxically, in doing the very thing you've been systematically avoiding?
That's definitely something to chew on. We really encourage you to reflect on what we've discussed today. Perhaps you'll just start observing your own patterns with a little more curiosity, or maybe even experiment with a tiny shift in your focus of attention next time you feel that familiar wave of unease rising. The path to navigating social situations with more ease and confidence is undoubtedly a personal one, unique to each individual, but it always starts with that single, informed step forward. Thank you so much for diving deep with us today.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep thriving.